Universalist Church. And thanks to Terry for fixing the mic, because as you know, I wander. So you've been working on acceptance all month, or hearing about it and talking about it, and I don't know what the other folks have talked about, although I'm quite fascinated and excited about your next guest, who will be talking about radical acceptance of a stranger. But when I thought about acceptance and coming here today, my mind went back to a trip that David and I were blessed to take 2 years ago to China. His son Lonnie was getting married to Haisine, a wonderful, beautiful, bright Chinese woman that he'd met at Cornell, where they were both graduate students. And we thought, with this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, David's older brother Doug and his wife Jill and I thought, well, we'll travel for several weeks in China before we get to the town where the wedding is and spend that part of the week there, the last week. So I had been warned before we left about the air pollution in China. But I was completely unprepared for what we encountered. The first couple of days that we were there, I spent the entire time distressed and angry and upset. I mean, it was unacceptable to me. It was like fog. It was almost like there was a fire, and people kept saying, "Oh, you're here on such a good day." And I would wail out, and justifiably so. You know, what are we leaving our children in this world? Stories and fantasies about once upon a time there were blue skies and you could see stars at night. And then I would, with great histrionics, periodically kind of push the air out of my way as I were walking, as though I were swimming through a sea of pollution. And it was horrible, but when I step back and look at this from sort of a God's eye view down, I see these 4 people, Americans, in amazing China, having an amazing trip that they'll never have again, staying in amazing places with adventures and experiences they'll never get to do again, eating amazing food all the way through this experience. And there they are, except for the little redhead in the middle of the group, who is busy pushing the air out of the way and decrying the air climate, reminding God probably of, I don't know how many of you know the artist Edmund Gorey, and he used to paint black and white paintings that look sort of Addams Family-like. And he did a series once with the alphabet. And there was a drawing of like a Victorian little girl lying on a plush padded bench with her feet up in the air, choking herself, and it said, S is for Susan, who perished of fits. So there I was in the midst of all of this amazing stuff, missing the entire trip because I, there in the picture, bug-eyed and red of face, was just mad. Now there is a happy ending to this story. When I tell it, I like to explain it as, because I am such a spiritual giant, I was unable to stay in this discombobulated state for very long. The truth is, it was probably due a lot more to a couple of decades being steeped in a wide variety of 12-step programs and really simmered thoroughly in an activist church, the United Church of Christ, much like the Unitarians. And that was what made me uncomfortable enough to drive me to my knees and say, God, I do not want to waste this trip. Help me to accept this situation exactly as it is and get on with the trip and do what I can when I get home. An interesting point is, by the way, before I was driven to that point of prayer, I noticed that after my couple of days of ranting and raving, do you know the air quality in China had not changed one iota? And nobody seemed to care except to point at this strange little red-headed woman who was going like this through the summer palace. And in Beijing. So finally, having said, help me to accept this and do what I can when I get home, I was given that gift of grace, but I want you to remember and pay attention to the part that was at the end. Let me do what I can when I get home. What we ended up doing was praying and coming to some action, but that brings me actually to the talk here. I don't know what you have heard over the last few weeks when people have talked about acceptance. Very often, and very rightly so, there is discussion about the inner peace and freedom that one gets when one accepts situations as they are, takes it for what it is. As it said in the Serenity Prayer, encounters the world as Jesus did, as it is, not as we would have it be. But remember the song we sang just before this, We Are a Gentle, Angry People? We go not quietly into that sweet good night of inner peace. You know this, I've been around this crowd long enough to know that you do not take your hard-fought, meditated for, whatever, inner peace, and then just come together on Sunday mornings to sit as a self-satisfied, pious, self-congratulatory congregation, taking the world as it is, forever and ever, amen. I can't see that at all. You people take your hard-earned inner peace and you take it out in the world to make changes. And that brings us to my point about acceptance. I mean, what is the point? And what is acceptance? Well, I think you are people of the 3 A's. Awareness, acceptance, and action. Awareness, I'm not going to spend much time on. In China, let's go back there and kind of look at what happened. In China, it was pretty obvious that I was aware of the air pollution, and it was pretty obvious to anyone. And it was also pretty aware to me and to everyone else that I was distressed about it, and that it was taking over my whole trip. It got to the point where I just didn't want to waste this trip anymore. So being aware of the problem, I moved into the next A, which is acceptance. Now I want to tell you some things acceptance is not. Acceptance does not mean approval or promotion or passivity by simply accepting what is. It means that I just have to let go of the past and all the things that have led up to this and say, this is what is right now. It just is. And that frees me from that squirrel running around in my cage with all the woulda, shoulda, couldas that keep me angry and out of action. And for heaven's sakes, we have all had them. I listened to the other day to the Diane Rehm show on NPR. Do any of you ever listen to that? Yeah, I highly recommend it. She has people who talk on all different subjects from different sides respectfully and calmly. You learn a lot. Well, this particular day, they were discussing the Islamic State that is doing horrendous things. It was after the beheading. And what can we do? What can the West's response be? What should it be to this scourge that's going on in the Middle East? And by golly, the panelists had some good discussions and things going on, but periodically, about every 4th call, one of the callers would bring up, what if, in the past, what if we had never invaded and Saddam Hussein was still in power? Do you think this group would still be there? What if, when Obama pulled out, he hadn't done it so abruptly and taken all the troops, would we be having this? What if something had happened in the past that has already been done? That ship has sailed, and now we're left with what is. How many times, and I don't know anyone here who would ever do this, who, if you were having difficulty in your marriage or your relationship, would think, If only I had married Betty instead of Barbara. And we developed this whole fantasy about how life would have been different. Some people have even been known to look up Betty on Facebook to see what she's up to or other old loves. And instead of dealing with what you've got, we're just busy in this fantasy life and the rest of our life falls apart. Instead of saying, you know, I didn't marry Betty, I married Barbara. And what do I need to do to either be present and work on changing myself to save this relationship or plan to get out of it, to take some action? Then there was the one that I came up against, always seem to be coming up against, but again recently, where you look and you stand on the scale one day and you say, my God, how did this happen? It must be my mother's fault because of the way she fed me. But then at some point, you know, instead of blaming her or the way they hide how many calories in food, like you can't read those little labels, and I have to stop and say, you know, maybe I was the one who ate all those peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and had the second desserts, regardless of what my mother ever did. And now this is where I am. Instead of just being angry and resentful and not doing anything, maybe it's time to say, you know, I've been facing this since I was 6 years old. What do I need to do to change? Where do I need to go to get help? Done it before and it's worked, and lately, after a 10-year hiatus, which actually wasn't my fault. But this one I can blame on cancer. I had this strict food thing that I did for a long time and did it without exception, and then I got this cancer where they told me I had 6 months to live. Well, I didn't want to smoke anymore and I didn't want to drink again, but by God, there were some things I wanted to eat that I had not had for 10 years, like bread and peanut butter, and well, I could go on. All the sugar and grains. And besides, I was going to have a short life, and with cancer, it was my free ride to staying a size 6 forever. So, I gained 60 pounds and didn't die. Talk about a resentment. This was not how it was supposed to go. But back again now, slowly but surely, with my body the way it is now and my leftovers after the cancer, making the adjustments that needed to be made, finally eating healthy again, feeling better, slowly losing weight, moving my body. I had to make some changes. I couldn't be stuck in the coulda, woulda, shouldas, and whose fault is it anyway. So now I know about getting into acceptance. It doesn't mean I simply say, well, it's the way it is forever, and give up and lie down and die. Next step is to get into action. Every single one of these examples had an action that comes, because I believe that the natural outcome, the natural byproduct of real acceptance of what is right in front of you is the freedom to get into action, to act creatively and purposefully. Not angrily, flailing around, but to be centered. And as you people here do, I know, seek Spirit's guidance for what am I supposed to do next? What is the next right thing? Pretty simple, 3 A's, let's all do it, and we'll never have these issues again, right? Yeah. Just recently, I bumped up against another one. When I was sick and had to stop my ministry, I always resented it. And even though I was a miracle that I didn't die and recovered, it's been a lot of years of fighting that battle and thinking, well, then I'll get well so I can go back and have a church again and be a full-time minister, because I really love that and it's what God wants me to do. And becoming aware that my body was such I couldn't, accepting that, and then trying to get into action. But it's come up again the last year or so because my macular degeneration, now that I've outlived the cancer, has progressed enough that I can no longer really see much of anything. And I can't drive, and there's a lot of stuff I can't read. I love my iPad. And so now I have become focused on what I call the can't do ministries. Well, I can't do the things I used to do, like be on conference committees or things because it takes too much reading, or visitation because I can't drive, or this or that. I can't do ministry. And I finally became so unhappy with what I couldn't do. It seemed like everything I couldn't do. I was again driven to my knees and asked God to show me the right question, which was, what can I do? You know, you would be amazed at how many things people are willing to ask you to do that don't need any eyesight or driving at all. Some of the things I can do that fulfill my passions that I love. I can be the person who serves the post-worship service communion at my church every Sunday. I love that. I can come and preach here when I'm invited. I can sponsor a clergywoman who does interim ministries and travels all around and has no home base in her 12-step program. Don't need to read or drive for that. And I can, most recently, my big passion started up, run into a good friend who's the faith director. I can do a bunch of stuff working with Marriage Matters Arizona, working to bring marriage equality to this state. You'd be amazed at the things that you can do without being able to read or drive or have a full day's energy. And so the question I have is, what can you do? You probably are already aware of all the things you cannot do, because we use them all the time as excuses. You know, I heard once, and I hated this, and it stuck in my heart, said that the thing we really fear most, that we really can do, a bunch of the things we've told ourselves we can't. So think about it. What is it in your life that you need to ask God for the grace to accept? What person, place, institution is unacceptable to you, that you need to be able to accept as he, she, it is, to be freed to move into finding what Spirit is calling you to do in your journey. Because while it is true that the only thing any of us can change, we can't change another person, place, or situation. The only thing that we can change is ourselves. What we feel, think, do, and say. And if you think about it, doesn't everything really on our spiritual journey really come down to you, and you, and you, and you, being willing to get into action, hook up with God, and make a difference in the world as it is? I'd like to ask you to take your bulletins, if you would, and open them to the back page where it has Reinhold Niebuhr's prayer. And thinking of what we've just talked about, not doing it as a responsive reading, I'd simply like you to pray this with me out loud. God, give me the grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed, courage to change the things which should be changed, and the wisdom to distinguish the one from another, living one day at a time enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, this sinful world as it is, not as I would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if I surrender to your will, so that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. In all of your many names we pray this. Amen.
Please rise.
Oh.
That's okay. Managing to get the lavalier mic to work has its costs. Please rise now as you're willing and able, and join in our closing hymn, Be Thou My Vision, number 20. As we extinguish our challenge, please join me in reading our mission statement as a demonstration of our fellowship, our support for one another, and our commitment to the wider community. We agree to provide a safe place to celebrate diversity, draw inspiration for living better lives, foster social and environmental justice, and compassionately support each other in our spiritual searches. Thank you to our musician, Joe Cleveland, to Tom Bagush for our chalice lighting and the videography today, to our greeters, Lori and Elizabeth, and to all others who are helping today, and of course to Reverend Princehouse, who will now provide our benediction.
Go now with a new vision, God's vision. Hook up with God for some real holy action and do some justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with your God into this world. Amen.
Reverend.